Welcome everybody to GoLocal Live. I'm Josh Fenton, CEO and co-founder of GoLocal, and we've got an exciting afternoon. One of the biggest newsmakers going, I think, in 2020, Barbara Ann Fenton-Fung, no relations,
Not
although
at all.
both born at Newport Hospital.
Oh, were you really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, back to the island and everything.
So you shook up the world by announcing this week that you have filed papers, the first step in becoming a candidate for running against Nick Mattiello, Speaker of the House in District 15. Nick Mattiello, all speakers in Rhode Island are tagged as the most powerful force politically in the state. Let's go right to it. Why
that one? Why kick it off like that?
Why are you the woman to better represent District 15?
Yeah, and when you're taking on the establishment, that's a big question you have to be able to answer very well to yourself and then to everybody else door to door. When we're looking at the big picture, on Monday I filed what we call a CF1 for insiders, which means I can legally start the process of fundraising and assembling a team. There's a lot of really strict legal rules, and for people who love election security, they're going to be happy too, that I can't even set up a fundraising page without going through many, many steps. So that process started Monday and allows me to do this for the next few weeks to months and then formally kick off. When you're going up against the establishment, you better have a really good plan. There's obviously many things that led us to this point. I was rumored to be looking at the mayoral race, which I fully admit. But we just realized that with our family goals right now, that wasn't the best fit. And then in the autumn, we kind of took a look at 15. Nick Mattiello has served since about 13, 14 as speaker and several years before that. And it's just become very clear, not only to myself, but to other members in the neighborhood and to the state at large. The 2013, 2014 Nick Mattiello no longer exists. He used to be a firewall against some of the legislation that we never thought would go through, whether you're in the pro-life community. We go back, way back when, he was a big proponent of tolls, and I remember you guys even reported on him firing Rep. Hull, Rep. Solomon, when they didn't toe the line with him. So there was the early Nick, who was really looking at doing some reformer, doing the master lever. There was him. He's just become a corroded out version of himself, and it's been frustrating to see. And so truly, he no longer represents the values of many people in District 15.
Is that though, you're herding cats as Speaker of the House, right?
Sure.
You've got this array of different personalities, geographies, and as we all know, Burrville has as much to do with Onlyville as Yemen does to Bulgaria. I mean, literally in their values.
For such a small state, we've got a huge amount of diversity, and you have to balance that out.
And does he just have to, as speakers, maintain order, build consensus, et cetera, et cetera?
And so when you're looking at what I've heard, people like, well, what happens if he falls? Then we're going to have a progressive bloc. It doesn't matter at this point who the speaker is. If that progressive bloc grows to 25, 30 strong, they're going to be able to block any budget and have a tremendous amount of influence in their legislature. So if people are worried about the progressives growing in influence, they need to look not at District 15, where it'll be a conservative Dem for a moderate Republican. That trade's not going to be ideologically too different. But you've got to look at Newport County. You've got to look at East Bay. You've got to look at South County. It's all blue now.
Yeah,
it's
you saw districts that were rock solid Republican for decades and decades.
With a fantastic rep in Anthony Giarrusso. And so things have changed. If you are worried about that and you are in those districts, I'd say, you know what, then you need to go out and support that Republican or the conservative Dem who's running. And that's how you minimize some of that progressive influence. And as Bernie Sanders is showing on the national stage, that can catch fire.
Yep,
it sounds nice when you're just giving things away.
Val Endress was here from Rhode Island College.
Oh, she's so wonderful.
She is wonderful. And how do you stop Bernie? We had an interview with Tad Devine we ran on Monday that we did on Sunday. He ran his campaign in 16 and ran Yang in 20. There's not much stopping Bernie Sanders from running right through this thing. He's going to have a big win in California on Super Tuesday and pick up a lot of delegates.
Even Texas.
And potentially even Texas. Well, your announcement Monday, I'll make the argument, puts you as the third most prominent female politician in the state of Rhode Island after the governor, Nellie Gorbea. You are now at the forefront of politics in the state of Rhode Island simply by challenging him.
Taking it on. You're up for the challenge, let's go.
What's he done right? Everything can't be bad.
No, it's not. And I'll point to early on, like I said, removal of the master lever. Has it made that much difference in elections? No, we haven't seen that yet. But again, more of a reformer early on in his career. But then we went down the world with tolls, the Paw Sox Stadium debacle, and then back and forth. Now I'm a very strong member of the pro-life community, and then when I think you give your word to something, if your word means nothing anymore, then your power as speaker also is greatly diminished. And quite simply, he just, as soon as the last mail ballot was counted and the pro-life community went balls to the wall for him, they went mail ballots, they went out there and were calling and going door to door. And then he just basically said, the one piece of legislation that you never wanted to go through, he let it go through. He'll be a coward. He'll say, yeah, I voted no on the floor, but the power of the speaker
100%. That bill never sees the light of day.
You can kill that bill in committee, and he hid in his office. Blake Filippi, who is minority leader for the Republicans, he went down as an ex officio, and he tried to kill it in committee. But Nick was hiding up in his office. So, I mean, there's that. But when you look early on, he did do some good stuff. He came around to the car tax removal when Steve Frias was running against him. All of a sudden, he had a good moment on that. But those are things that are good. What you come to this election is, what are we doing now? And that kind of trajectory has gone off kilter, especially for the values of 15, which is different from the rest of the state largely. We're a very pro-Trump, very pro-life, very pro-2A community. And so, when you continue to represent that district, those values need to kind of be renewed.
Are folks, obviously you have a perception of it, but are folks tired of the headlines? And there's been a lot of headlines about the Speaker of the House. As of recently, there's a sitting grand jury in which he is some ways involved in.
Right.
No one knows what the scope of the grand jury is. We know that two senior members, the two most senior members of his staff at the State House, have been before the grand jury.
Just last week, yeah.
And we also know that we believe that it has something to do with the interaction between the Speaker's office and the Convention Center Authority. Bernie Bonanno, who is not a very political person, came out straightforward and said, this is political, it's been punishment because we wouldn't kowtow to the Speaker on his friend Demers, a former state trooper who had been head of security there. And is that trickling down to the district level? It
is, but it's not that one thing. So we go all the way back now, which seems like years ago. I mean, this has been going on forever. You even go back to the point where not only in the next few weeks do we have the Jeff Britt trial starting, but then there's also this mention of a federal grand jury looking into the Dr. Pedro scandal of last year, which might be the one. You could almost rename any line item veto bill as the Dr. Pedro rule, because he is the prime example of what was going on there. You go back even further than that. It was the Frank Montanaro free tuition scandal. It's not just been one thing over the years, it keeps going and going. So this is scandal 5 or 6 at this point. And, Ray Gallison, Carnevale, they were members of his team. It was never him.
Is Nick Mattiello corrupt?
Yeah, I mean, that's a strong statement, and I'd want to see more proof.
It's a strong question.
Yeah, and the question is there, where is the proof that ties him back to that? And I think that's what the grand jury's being allowed to see. All of us on the outside don't have that yet. I say this, and I look at it from just watching my husband over the years in the CEO role of Cranston, you are always going to have 1 or 2 rogue employees, okay? But when you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things swirling around, your leadership skills need to be questioned quite a bit. And why do they feel that they can act like that? And whether it's my husband or Nick himself, they reflect upon the mayor or the speaker. And you have to kind of be able to put together a better team than what he's done. So I think corrupt until I see any real proof of it, I won't go that far. But I don't think his leadership skills are that strong when we have, these type of scandals popping up month after month. I don't think there's been a day since New Year's when there hasn't been a negative headline about Nick in the paper. And it is. I said this a couple days ago. When we put that out on Monday, we were bombarded that day. People who had Mattiello yard signs before. People have known him since a child because he grew up in that neighborhood.
Right.
And they were like, it's just enough is enough. They're just exhausted. And I think for some of them too, it's hard to watch. A guy you grew up with and again, looked up to at one point, to see the trajectory in the fall has been.
What's the biggest difference between the two of you?
Yeah, I mean, you look at it that way. There is, I will say, from an ideological standpoint, I'm probably a bit more aggressive in trying to at least, again, as a Republican, being out there a little bit more. I want to see more happen on gun safety policy when we're looking. I'm pro 2A. My big issue here is turn it around and go, what are we doing for schools?
Right.
Where are we in school safety? I don't see those firearm bills really moving the needle on anything. Sometimes there's legislation to be legislation, and you're like, what are we doing to make the school safer? I want to make sure that every single kid in school is as safe as the politicians on Smith Hill. And there's been some talk about removing school resource officers and from different schools and different communities.
That was proposed.
Yeah, like that's not grounded in the reality of what we're doing. I've spoken about this a little bit before too, but my best friend's husband was one of the first police officers on scene at Sandy Hook. And his job that day ended up being running the mobile morgue. And I said to him after that, I was like, where do we go? What would have stopped Adam Lanza that day? What would have decreased that horrible death toll and ruined so many families? And what he said was the same recommendation that came out of the Marjorie Stoneman massacre in Florida, is that you need more school resource officers and good guys with a gun, who are willing to use it. Obviously, there was issues in Florida. But that type of safety and security, I would really work in a bipartisan manner. I know Rep. Amore has done a lot of work towards this.
Right.
In Cranston, my husband's done a little differently, because funding school resource officers is, of course, expensive. In Cranston, they have 23 schools. So you come back here, he does a police detail bit, and so they're not there all the time, but they're constantly patrolling, and the parents and the principals have come up to him and said, we love this, we know our kids are safe. And it's also fostering better police community relations at a young age. So I think we have to be creative and see where we're going, but on the 2A issue itself, that's where I'd be my focus, and I'd really want to push that forward.
Let's talk a little bit, you talked a little bit about sort of ideologically, let's talk about getting stuff done, because for most people who live in Rhode Island, they have no interaction with their state legislators.
They have no idea who they are, usually.
They have no idea who they are. They come knocking on doors. They may or may not remember your name. It's a very humbling, I was a city councilman in Providence. It's a very humbling experience. How do you differentiate yourself as doing good constituent service? Because that's really what people care about. My mother has a problem with Health and Human Services. My child has an opiate addiction and I need help there.
Yeah.
How can you break through and differentiate in that structure?
Well, and it's funny you say that, because it's true. Outside of like the mayor or whatnot, sometimes you don't see it. But that's because even most mayors are very, very good at retail, per se. They're out in the community all the time. And it would take a very similar thing. If you're going to be a mayor, you ought to be good at retail. Because you're not going to be good at it.
Because you have to do a lot of it.
Right. And I think that's a little bit of a difference there. I mean, when you talk about opioids, it's one of my passions. I'm on the Cranston Substance Abuse Task Force. And in Cranston, we just brought Chris Herron in. I know you've known him before.
Yep.
Phenomenal speaker, really getting to the kids early. We also do a lot of work with the seniors. And because sometimes they get pain meds for certain surgeries, they stay in a medicine cabinet, and then all of a sudden the grandkids are finding Vicodins and stuff like that.
I'll tell you a great Chris Herron story. I used to play basketball with Billy Reynolds from the Providence Journal for 25 years, and we were playing up at Brown one day. We're in the locker. Afterwards, Chris Herron calls him. Chris at the time has not cleaned up completely, and he was playing in Iran, and you can hear him say to Billy, I should have come here years ago, because in Iran, if they catch you with drugs, they'll cut off your hand.
The Sharia, very, very different than what we've got here in Rhode Island. No, but it's true, and it's kind of like, as a state rep, I would be much more visible. Clearly, the speaker has his own duties, and he's a lawyer on the side too. But, I would probably take the path that my husband is and be out at every single event in the community.
Your simple fact of you running, whether you win or lose, you become instantaneously a viable candidate in 2022.
Gosh, we're thinking this far again? Okay,
well,
all right.
These races start awfully early.
Yes.
What does that mean for you? Would you ever look to run statewide?
Oh, down the road, we'll see where all that goes. 2020 is my only focus right now. I know everybody says that,
could
but
Alan Fung run for the third time in 2022, pull a Mirth York, or on the good side of Bruce Sunland?
Ronald Reagan, Abraham Lincoln, yep.
And could you also be on the Republican ticket in 2022?
That would be really weird, I'll be honest. That is not where this is setting up. And my husband's future is my husband's future. He's got a lot of opportunities right now.
Yeah.
Do I think that one day Alan Fung is governor? Absolutely. Okay.
Heck, you thought it was going to be.
We thought it was in 14, wasn't it, for an errant email towards the end? So I would say I don't see that scenario ever happening in 22. And my only, this is my first race. I just happen to jump in and run against the speaker because I think it's a race I can win. I think I can do really good stuff as a state representative for District 15. That is not the statewide ticket in 22. That's not where I'm going with that. But in the future, my interests are more global, international affairs, opioid. I like big picture policy issues. So we'll see where that goes in the future. I'm a healthcare professional. I work full-time as a physical therapist, and that's my love right now. So we'll see.
Let's talk about the Trump factor, because it plays at all levels right now. And, a week ago, he looked completely unbeatable, and now the stock market's dropped.
Coronavirus hits again. Yep.
Stock market, and listen, even if he was up 20 points, he'd find a way to create a controversy to make it.
He steps on his own foot a lot.
How do you deal with that, first and foremost, as a Republican, and then secondly, as a candidate? Yeah,
so, it clearly hurt my husband in 2018.
Well, let me just tell you, it hurt, from our standpoint, it hurt Steve Frias in both the last race. He could not answer the question.
Are you voting for him?
Are you voting for Donald Trump?
Right.
We must have sent that email 45 times, right?
No, and and look, I'll be straight out. I am voting for Donald Trump in 2020. He makes it difficult sometimes, with what he says, but you look at the results, and my district is a very pro-Trump district, from +9 to +16, depending on the precinct. It's just been one of those things, and you look at the Democratic options right now. We have people are bringing back socialism, and it's just, this is not the way I'd want my future to go here. I think, though, with the impeachment, you see Trump's numbers jump up and down. It's kind of where Obama's were before his reelection against Mitt, but you're bouncing up and down a lot. We have a long way to go. There's going to be probably some shiny ball and some X factor that's going to throw the whole race into chaos again. But the Democrats really haven't coalesced behind one person early, which I think is what, if you were going to do to take out an incumbent, that's what you have to do. Going through a few gubernatorials, I've learned that primaries are not necessarily very helpful when you're going up against an incumbent, especially. Right. So I think that they're squandering their opportunities there. Trump, my husband's never met him. I've met him once in a cattle call line and everything. He is who he is. He's eccentric, and as a Republican, sometimes in the Northeast, we don't always align on all the views, especially when it comes to immigration. But overall, when we're looking at the economy, we're very happy we're not in World War III yet. And there's certain issues in North Korea that everything's kind of stayed where it is right now, and so it's been okay. I don't agree with everything.
If you knock off Nick Mattiello, the likely successor is Joe Sicarci. He is perceived to be more centrist, Nick a little more conservative.
The spectrum, the pendulum swings a little bit.
And the overall leadership would probably be more progressive, middle of the road to progressive. Does that align? Does that help conservatives in Rhode Island? Or does that open the door to, you have a new proposal from the AFL-CIO to tax 1%ers, you have a number of new initiatives to increase revenues. We've had Mike DeBiase, when he was director of administration, and the governor both say, listen, we don't have a revenue issue, we have a spending issue. And Nick Mattiello will say the same thing. Right. Nobody necessarily wants to step forward and make very difficult cuts.
Well, he has it. You look at his own budget. When he came in as speaker, GA budget was around 38, now it's up around 46 again. It's
47 going to 52.
Because they do the enacted and the reals, it's a little different. And I know last year they had the spending that they did to redo the chambers, that's fine. But a large driver of that really is the JCLS, which has been in the news a lot, and that's just personnel costs and how to run it.
Is Blake Filippi on that issue appropriately, and is he been effective in addressing the issue?
So in the minority, you use the bully pulpit as much as you can, and Blake has done a good job of that as of late, especially with the JCLS. It's one of those things that I think a lot, and it's not just Nick. This evidently hasn't met since 2009. They can't find real meetings for it. Nobody really knows.
I've asked ex-staffers of just about everyone. No one can even remember.
Right. So this has been messed up for many, many years.
Yeah.
Okay. It's nice that sometimes you take advantage of a crisis to make things better and mold it into a more ethical place. I think it's something everybody was just like, oh yeah, that's the thing if we need it.
Should Dennis Alger, the Republican minority leader of the Senate, be speaking out instead of kind of going along with Dominic Ruggiero
on the JCLS?
The JCLS.
Well, I think there's a bill in. Did they vote on it yesterday or today or
There's
whatnot?
There's a Senate bill too.
Yeah,
but that doesn't really address the core issues, which is how does unilaterally, first of all, they haven't met. Dennis Alger's never
and they refuse to meet,
either.
and there's the lawsuit, and I think there's a lot of,
posturing.
Can everybody just stop for a second, put it aside, meet, and let's figure this out?
Right.
That's how I would be like, just throw this out, like forget it. Everybody get in a room. That's how I operate. I really wish Congress did too. I wish everybody would just meet and say, hey, we're going to solve immigration this session. You know what I mean? I wish we would tackle the issues. Because the middle, and for so long, the fringes there, they came up to power because the middle wasn't doing anything. You know what I mean? If you're not getting anything done, and this guy's more, you just see how the country's gone like, well, you're not doing anything, so let's give these people a chance. When you go back to your original question though, in the Senate and everything, yes, there should be equal power.
Should Dennis Alger be speaking out as a good Republican and a reformer and saying enough is enough, I'm going to vote for reform?
I hope he does.
Okay. Yeah. Let's go to money. As Speaker of the House, even a damaged Speaker of the House can raise, I don't want to say limitless amounts of money.
But a lot.
But a real lot,
of money.
$300,000, $400,000, $500,000 is not out of the question.
Not at all. And he spent about $300,000 to Frias's about $25,000 to $30,000 that first time around. And the difference was 85 votes. So yeah, we understand that.
And what level of fundraising do you think you can accomplish? Can you can't get outspent 10 to 1.
Not at all.
Can you raise $100,000?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And a little bit of that is too, I'm very lucky. My husband has formed big fundraising networks. But even just outside of that, within the past 2 or 3 days, there have been companies who I thought were in Mattiello's corner, and they're like, we're going to put together a fundraiser for you. So I've been very, very excited for the early response to that. I need a fantastically funded team, not only from a comm standpoint, but mail ballots.
Right.
He's not going to be, we know how that turned in 16. That's a real, it's interesting. I mean, this is going to be Mortal Kombat, ground to ground, door to door.
So I'll tell you the story. I won on machines by 26 votes. Out of, I don't know, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 cast in that race. It was the 90 race, which was a big turnout race in Rhode Island. And I had not chased paper. I decided not to chase paper. And I'm like, I have lost this race.
Yeah, right away.
And it was a recount for us and a recount for the mayor's race. It was a 3-way mayor's race. Cianci, Lippitt, and Arnaldo.
That was that race, yeah.
And so I'm like, I'm not going to get one Arnaldo. I ran as an independent. I'll probably split Lippitt. Yep. Because he had strong African-American support as well. So I'm not going to win all of the Lippitts. And Cianci, God, for some reason, Cianci put me on all of his ballots.
Really?
Because he's like, oh, I'd rather have this stupid young kid than this other guy.
He called everybody a kid, too. Yeah. He still called my husband a kid.
And so it got down to 7 in the recount. And then it went back up and it held at 16. So I always say it was 9, functionally it was 9 people. Yeah. And you win at the door. These races are won at the door.
Yeah, this is not a race where you're going to be seeing too much TV or anything like that. But the campaigns these days are about mail ballots, IDing your voters, and a digital strategy.
Yeah.
But
it's at the door. People are either going to like you
or not.
And say, God, she seemed like a nice woman, and she'll represent me, and I know who she is, and I can call her if there's a problem.
Yeah.
And or they won't.
And it's one of the funniest things I've had to do this for my husband. Not only the mayoral race has been the gubernatorial, and going door to door, you're really putting yourself out there first, and it's an awkward thing your first few times. But people are extraordinarily kind. In Cranston, especially, they would invite me in and like have dinner, and I was like, I've got like 15 more dinners.
The rule is never go.
I know, you can't go in.
Ballinger's made the point, and I think it's right, about Michael Bloomberg's stumble. Both debates were kind of train wrecks. and not doing the retail politics of New Hampshire and Iowa, going to those fairs, going to those coffee houses.
The Iowa State Fair even,
all
like
those things, and being barraged by questions in people's living rooms that you don't want to answer, but it gives you good practice on how to answer those questions.
And I've always found too, and again, is he kind of hidden a little bit with Bloomberg, but taking it to like the 15 race, people, even if they don't agree with you, they'll respect if you don't lie to them. You know what I mean? Like, you might hate my position on one thing, but we're with each other on 80% of it. And my husband said that very straight on. Just be honest. If that's what you believe in, they're gonna at least say, "Hey, thanks for not lying to me for trying to get my vote." You know what I mean? Like, people can see right through you.
What's your biggest worry about this race?
I would say you look at what's your own personal weakness, and I just have to be able to kind of keep my mouth in check. I got a little bit of an Irish mouth at times. And we said before, I made an unforced error.
There won't be any barroom brawling.
No, there's nothing like that. But you know what I mean? Like, I made an unforced error last year when I threw, after Cienki became chair. You know what I mean? I could have handled that situation much, much differently. And so you take, and you learn from them, and as long as you learn from it and change it.
Where'd you grow up in Newport?
So Newport, Middletown. I graduated from Middletown High School.
Gotcha.
Over there.
So you never lived
I still live in Newport. Well, we have the house down there. Yeah. Not Fifth Ward, Yachting Village.
Gotcha. Last thing. Let's say he gets cleared.
Yep.
There's no indictments coming out of the grand jury. Dr. Pedro grand jury doesn't develop. We haven't really seen.
We haven't seen where those have been. Yep.
Especially federal grand juries. Not much gets leaked out of federal grand juries.
Could be months. Yep.
Could be months, or could never happen. And we would never know if it did or didn't happen until something was announced. Does that undercut your argument that Nick Mattiello needs to be replaced?
So if it was one scandal, I think yes. 3, 4, 5, 6 later, that type of scandal fatigue is really what's hitting Cranston there. So I don't think it undercuts it much. And then people also remember very strongly his betrayal of the pro-life community. That's still very fresh, very raw. And that again, when he says he's going to be that firewall, he's shown you he just can't be trusted.
I lied. It wasn't the last question. Who's going to be the next mayor of Cranston?
Ooh, good question. I think there's going to be primaries on both sides, and I don't think the entire field is out there yet. We'll see. No matter who comes out of the Republican primary, we're obviously going to support the Republican candidate. Yeah. My husband has worked too hard for the past 12 years to get that city on a very strong financial footing. I think that we want somebody to be very financially conservative as well. My husband's always taken the point that every single dollar that comes in as a tax dollar, I treat it like my own, and he doesn't spend it any differently than he'd want to spend his own money. So I think, somebody who's going to be a very good financial steward is going to be, probably the next mayor.
2, 3 potentially strong Republican candidates that could beat each other up pretty good. Is Steve Stikos the strongest Democrat?
I don't know Maria Bucci, and I believe she's going out there as well. I don't know them that well, so I don't want to make broad striking comments, and we'll see how they develop their positions and what they want to focus on. It's interesting. My husband said when he first ran for mayor, nobody wanted that job because the city was near bankruptcy, and now everybody's like, oh, it looks good now. So we'll see.
That's great. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much, Josh. Appreciate it.
We're going to obviously be following this race.
We'll be talking, I'm sure, a lot in the future.
This is the race in the state of Rhode Island in 2020. This and the presidential campaign are really, it's just like 4 years ago all over again. Thanks so much for coming in. We will see you back tomorrow. Very busy day. A couple big announcements coming later this afternoon on GoLocal. Tune in. Thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon.